Now, when you get ready to begin a restore, SQL has a recovery process that it needs to go through, and you need to be aware of this. Whenever you have a transaction log that's being restored, you have committed and uncommitted transactions out here, and I'll put the uncommitteds over here to the right so we can see them. So what it's going to do in the restore process is it's going to write the committed transactions into the database, right? Well, any uncommitted transactions we don't want in the database, so we're simply going to take those out, and we're going to toss those out and not use them. But now think about this. If we have a chain of transaction logs to restore, this one could have some uncommitted transactions in this first transaction log that are actually committed or finished in the next transaction log we're going to restore. So we're going to have to tell SQL Server when to totally recover off that transaction log or not. So I'll show you that in just a few minutes. The first thing we always want to do whenever we start the restore process is if we're arriving on the scene of a database failure or a server failure, we want to attempt to back up the current log file that's in that database because that's the latest transactions and it has transactions up to the point of failure. So first step, back up the current log file, then set it aside. Then we want to do a restore from our newest full backup, our most recent full backup. Then we want to restore any differentials that we may have if we're using differentials. And now here's where the fun comes in. We need to restore the log files. If we have 5 log files, we're going to have to replay them in order. And notice that on all but the last, so if we've got 5 on the first 4, we're going to restore them. And if we're using Transact SQL, we're going to use the no recovery switch, and that tells it don't clean anything out of this transaction log. I got more transaction logs coming, and it might satisfy some of the transactions. On the very last transaction log that we restore, we will use the with recovery option. That tells it go ahead, clean the transaction log out, get rid of uncommitted transactions, write committed ones on into the database, and let's bring the database up into consistent state and bring it online for the users to use. Now, that's basically the recovery process you're going to have to go through. If you're not using log files or differentials, then you'll just restore your last full backup. Your question always is going to be in a backup and restore situation is, how much data do I need to protect? Most people need to protect every single piece of data that they possibly can. Now, there is a really cool tool that I want to bring to your attention. You don't hear this from a lot of people, and that is when I'm looking at a database and I'm trying to determine what's going on with that database and I need to know what condition it's in, there's a command I can run called database property ex. Now, this is actually a replacement for a property called database property that's been used in the past. Microsoft's already telling us they're going to do away with the database property function, and they're suggesting we use database property ex. And database property ex is actually a little bit more elegant. And let me go out to the management tool, and I want to show you this database property ex. Okay, so notice I've opened the Server Management Studio, and I'm going to now select database property ex, open parentheses, put the database that I want to check, and then in single quotes put status. And notice when I execute this, it tells me the current status of this database. Now, your choices are offline, which obviously means it's offline, online, which means it's online, restoring, which means this database is in the process of being restored, recovering, which means it's in the process of recovering itself, and emergency mode, which means only sysadmin members can access the database at this time. Now, if you'll notice something here, if I right-click this database and take it offline, let me let this thing come offline here. Then I can rerun this command and you will see what it looks like. And so now you'll notice the sales database is offline. If I run it, it's reporting to me that it's offline. This is a great way to check the status if you've got a database and you're not sure what state it's in. So in the next few videos, we'll continue on the topic of restoring databases.